Hello, everyone. This is Brooks Lambier here at We Are Soccer. We have Harvey Araton on here. Harvey is a former New York Times sports reporter, covered basketball for many years, the New York Knicks, and covered many other sports. So he's done Super Bowls, and a plethora of different sports. Harvey, how are you?
I'm good, Brooks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Harvey, you've recently written a novel, which we're going to get into here. But we're going to start into, why you kind of wrote the novel. So, like I said, you've been mainly a basketball reporter, but you've covered all the major sports. So why all of a sudden take a turn and write a book on soccer, which you've mainly been a basketball reporter for the last 25 years?
Well, I had a long career in sports journalism in the New York City area. I worked for four newspapers, the Staten Island Advance, where I grew up, um, sort of more of a local hometown paper,
Yep.
the New York Daily, the New York Post.
Mhm.
So that's where I started covering the NBA and the Knicks in particular. Went
Mhm.
to the New York Daily News after that, and then on to the Times for 25 years. I still contribute to the Times on occasion,
Mhm.
but for the most part, I'm doing my own thing these days. Um, I started out mainly as a basketball guy,
Mhm.
and then my last couple of years at the Daily News, I became a general columnist. And then at the Times, I wrote the Sports of the Times column for many years,
Mhm.
much of the 25 years that I was there. And so, of course, I covered sports across the board.
Mhm.
Soccer, surprisingly, was not one of them, because coming through the years, we didn't we covered the World Cup increasingly as the years went on, and it became a bigger sport in the U.S.
Mhm.
But I was mainly an American team sport guy with a lot of tennis mixed in.
Yeah.
But in the years that my sons played soccer, ran the gamut from youth rec league to travel to select to high school soccer,
Mhm.
I became more familiar with the sport. But in I would say the last 10 years that I was at the Times writing a sports column, I began to focus on the issue of youth sports. And I'll tell you where exactly it began. It was 2002. It was a year after the Little League World Series dealt with a major scandal. A kid named Danny Almonte from the Bronx,
Yeah.
um, was blowing everybody away in the Little League World Series, where you have to be like, 13 and under for the most part. He looked like he was 25. It turned out he was 15, I think. The scandal erupted. The following year, it was around those years where ESPN and some of the local regional networks began to broadcast every little league game, in the during the course of the series.
Yep.
I'm old enough to remember when the Little League World Series championship game was a one-time thing. It would be on ABC's Wide World of Sports on a Saturday, so it was kind of unique. Everybody kind of got a kick out of it. But all of a sudden, um, every game was on TV. And so it kind of moved me to call up Little League people
Mhm.
and ask them the question, not in an accusatory way, because I
Mhm.
thought it was a topic worth discussing.
Yeah.
But the question was, are we celebrating children or are we exploiting them?
Okay.
And by having all these games on TV, what was that going to potentially create?
Mhm.
And I remember interviewing a sports psychologist specializing in youth sports
Mhm.
psychology.
Mhm.
And he said something that stuck with me and kind of moved me through the years to continue writing about these issues, and then into this youth sports. It's a middle grade, 8 to 12
Yeah.
range readers novel. But he said something like, it's not so much appearing on television. Kids are pretty sharp. They understand what it's about.
Yep.
It's not so much them appearing on TV that creates the potential problem. It's what kids and mainly parents will
Mhm.
do to get them onto television, to
Yep.
reach that stage where they, are suddenly attaining a celebrity status. And I think today, back then, and maybe it was the whole ESPN,
Mhm.
delving into, Little League World Series that sort of launched this era that we're now in, which is the for-profit business industry taking over youth sports. I mean, the New York Times, my former paper, about a month and a half ago, ran a front page story about it now being a $60 billion industry with, mega entrepreneurs investing lots of money into it. And that raises the question of, how does this affect families, kids in a multitude of ways? So that's really what moved me. In subsequent years, I wrote a series of articles. One was following two kids in my hometown where I live now, Montclair, as they navigated the mandate to either play club soccer or high school soccer. I followed these two kids through a season, and it was really interesting watching the two kind of deal with the emotions of one playing for his high school team and the other one, playing for a club team and traveling an hour to practice and all that stuff. I'm just fascinated by it, and I'm not necessarily, condemning the idea of places for elite athletes to do their thing, because let's face it, if a kid is a mathematical genius or a great violinist,
Yeah.
we're going to say, bravo, he's being taught by the world's greatest maestro, right? We shouldn't separate elite athletes from that, that kind of experience to develop their talent. The question is, how do we know? And how do we know? So that's why I chose the middle grade reader at eight to 8 to 12 range, because I feel that is the most vulnerable age and the one where parents are probably most susceptible to like pouring tons of money into something that doesn't have a ghost of a chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And and what that might create in terms of their child feeling like a failure or burning out too soon because of the pressure. So that's really the background of how I got to write this particular book.
Interesting. Actually, let's talk about the research. And through everything, I always get the feeling it's almost like people treat it as I own a stock or a business. I invest my money, I deserve a return in some type of way. Do you feel like it's very much like that in youth sports from all the research you've just done that, hey, I'm a parent, I invest thousands, I should get something out of this?
I think I've been scouring lately a lot of chat boards and chat, and Facebook pages. There's a zillion of them.
Yeah.
In every state has one. Parents' advice for young goalies, and some of the stuff I see on these pages are pretty scary. Just this morning, I saw one where a parent said, "I could use some advice on how to help make my child a professional soccer player."
Yeah.
And they ran the gamut from serious responses to
Yep.
get a trainer, make sure they're playing at the elite club level, to uh, um, buy a professional team, and then
Yeah, yeah.
make your
Yep.
son the star midfielder.
Yep.
And I think so. Yes, I'll tell you a quick story. I remember a kid who played some youth soccer with one of my sons, and he was a good player, big kid, rangy kid, and they went through high school. And I remember the season, it probably was junior season, when fall sports athletes will be recruited or looking at schools. And I remember seeing them at one of the games. His family, the kid had wound up going to one of the parochial schools in the area, a very good soccer program. And they were playing our local public school where my son played. And I ran into the parents on the sideline, and I asked them, where their son was, what schools they'd been looking at. And he said, well, we're just starting to look into it. We probably invested $80,000 to $90,000 these last bunch of years in his youth soccer. We'll see if it was worth it. And I
Yeah.
remember being like almost wounded by that response, because I felt like saying, I didn't, but I felt like saying, did he have fun?
Yeah.
Did he learn about taking care of his body? Did
Mhm.
he have good relationships and good experiences and things that he would remember?
Mhm.
When you put a price tag on something and you expect to get, as you mentioned, something back in return, that's where the enormous pressure trickles down to the child.
Yeah.
And that's, in effect, I think one of the great potential dangers of the place we're in right now.
Hmm.
Because let's face it, there are places where I think Red Bull Academy here in New Jersey
Yeah.
is free for a gifted kid, but
Hmm.
all the other elite academies are for profit.
Hmm.
And, how do you know? You just don't, at that very young age, how do you know unless you are super realistic about who your child is,
Yep.
what they might be able to succeed, but most of all, what do they want out of it?
Yep.
And that's hard to read. All kids want to be great at something, at sports,
Hmm.
but do they really have that passion sort of built inside them? And you, as a parent, I think you really have to be careful. So this book, which is called The Goal of the Game,
Hmm.
um, and it publishes in mid-December, but it's available for pre-order now on Amazon, I have to say,
Yep.
um, is a book that's really, when you write a book that's a middle grade readers, of course, the message that you're looking at sending to parents is very different from the one that you're sending to children.
Yes.
And the message to parents would be, really get to know your child and be realistic
Yep.
about who that boy or girl is. And to the child, the message would be, um, that you're playing the game for the love of it.
Hmm.
And if you're playing it for any other thing, if you let any of that outside noise, whether it's coming from, the community, your parents, your peers, the stuff about, I want to get at least D1, I'll settle for D3. If you're
Yeah.
playing for those reasons at that young an age, you're not going to be happy. There will be exceptions. I think there'll be many kids who will go on to play, um, but there will be probably many more who burn out, or who are just not playing it for the sheer joy of the game and for the right reasons.
Yep. Yep. So let's kind of go into the novel a little bit. Do you want to give us a short description of the novel, the characters, the main characters, just kind of take us into the story?
Sure. So the main character is a boy named Zane, who's known as Z, just goes by the letter Z,
Hmm.
um, through his young years. And the book begins with Z waking up on the morning of his first game as a U13 player. And the team that he's been on from, like, from the kindergarten, kinder kicker program, has been started out as a bunch of kids who could barely dribble the ball and scratch their nose at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But each year they make improvements, they add kids, the normal thing, right? But as they ascend through the ranks, by the time they get to U13, they are now part of an elite league, like a regional league, more than a normal travel team.
Mhm.
And they have not only taken on kids from all around the area,
Mhm.
but they've dropped kids, who either get the message that they're not going to play much or who told this is not for you anymore. And three of the kids, who are dropped, who have left the team, are Z's best friends.
Mhm.
And as they describe it in the book, he wakes up that morning with a pit in his stomach,
Mhm.
humongous meatball. And his mom, has become the driving force. She's the parent manager. She's
Yep.
become the driving force of the team. And that relates to a family situation that involves Z's dad, an accident that, he was involved in, that Z feels somewhat guilty about.
Mhm.
Um, and so the mom has kind of taken over. The father was the first coach and taught him the game. He grew up with it
Mhm.
in Kearney, New Jersey, which is known as Soccer Town, USA.
Yeah.
It's where some of the early, I'd say great, but better American players like Tony Meola and Todd
Um,
Ramos played.
yep.
So um, Z is very unhappy about all of this at this point. He's at a point in his life where he needs to be surrounded by friends and family for nurturing more than strange kids he doesn't know.
Mhm.
And so the first chapter sort of ends with him walking down the stairs. He hasn't, he and his mom they're supposed to be leaving. He's barefoot, doesn't have his socks and cleats on, and he walks out into the kitchen where his mother's loading the Gatorade into the uh, packing up all the stuff,
Yeah.
and he just says, "I quit."
Oh.
And so then the story picks up at the beginning of Z's soccer career,
Hmm.
at at the very beginning, the very beginning stage,
Yeah.
and the book then takes us through what is an eventful several years of his growth with this team, the team's growth, his growth. He's a very small kid who happens to be a very feisty kid, so that's always an issue. Um, and the book goes on to the point where it takes us right back through the years,
Hmm.
and then takes us right back to the point where we start, where he quits.
Hmm.
And that sets up a conclusion that I think will be, for kids who read the book and for the parents who either read it with them or read it on their own, will be a stark reminder and an emotional reminder
Yeah.
of what is truly beautiful about team sports, and in particular youth sports. Um, there's a goal that is scored, um, as he makes his way back to
Mhm.
soccer, that really underscores, that point, that why we play. And if you're a child who happens to be particularly gifted and you go on to do great things at
Mhm.
whatever level, that's the bonus. But the true beauty of playing at any level, whether it's the youth level, as you grew up with team sports,
Yep.
is the camaraderie, the feeling good about yourself, the building of self-esteem, and the building of respect for your teammates, for your opponents, all of that. I think at this point, and again, I'm not writing this book as a statement against a place for elite athletes.
Mhm.
It's just the question is, how do we know and how do we make the best decisions, not only for them, but also for our finances?
Yep.
Um, so I think that, um, this what I'm hoping is that the book will be a reminder of just why most kids, all kids really,
Yep.
should play in their young years, most importantly, right? The most significant reasons.
Mhm.
And then we go from there.
Okay.
What happens later is up to the child. And of course, the nurturing. I think sometimes we like to believe, like what I saw on one of the boards
Mhm.
this morning, um, about a parent asking, you know, how can I help make my son a professional soccer player? I
Yep.
think sometimes parents truly believe you can create a great player,
Yeah.
when the truth is we can only nurture a great player. And I
Correct.
think that's an important difference and threshold that we shouldn't cross.
Yeah. Correct. So in this story, is there, like, I mean, I've been in the soccer business, I do scouting and, I've come across many different things, and is there kind of an antagonist in this book where like, someone, tells the parents, I can make you this, I can, because that's very much relative in what today's society is like you talked about, like you saw on the message board that someone's going to respond and be like, I've trained all these guys. I can make your son a pro player or daughter. Like, is there any one type of type of person in the story? Do you cover that?
Yeah, I think all the touchstones. As I mentioned, my two sons both played
Mhm.
rec league, travel, select,
Mhm.
um, and high school soccer.
Yep.
And so when you go through all those years with kids,
Mhm.
um, you experience a lot of these things. The overzealous parents,
Yeah.
um, that lead to confrontations. There's some of that in the book, or a little bit of that in the book.
Mhm.
Um, yes, there is the coach who takes over for the beloved coach
Mhm.
who has to return to England. Um, for a family situation who takes over and lays down the mandate that we're going for it. We're going for rankings. We're going for the Nationals trip to Las Vegas. Um, Now, I remember years ago, there was a kid, the guy in town whose son was a very good player. My kids had already aged out pretty much, or maybe they were in high school, but this kid was about 12 at the time or 11. And I ran into my friend. I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "Oh, we're going to Vegas next week." I said, "Oh, you're going on vacation?" He goes, "Oh, no, we have a tournament there." And I remember like being a little stunned, like we have national tournaments for kids 10 years old, 11 years old. But yes, we do now.
Yeah.
And so again, back to that theme of, what will families sacrifice when they are told at a very young age? What will they do when they are told, "Hey, the ship's leaving now. If you don't get on board, it's going to be too late. Your kid can forget about playing, he might make the high school team, but he'll be riding the bench. Forget about the scholarship, forget about, the dream of playing in whatever country or at MLS."
Mhm.
Um, so yes, there are those characters in the book
Mhm.
that fuel all of that, you know, uh, what do you call it, panic in parents, or um, the bring out all that ambition. Um, the coach who finally takes over is the one that finally drives Z to make his decision. It's sort of a coming of age decision where the boy decides for himself what's best for him, which is not easy to do. At that point, he's 12 years old.
Yep.
Um, but he's had to grow up a lot because of what's happened in his family life, the situation with his dad. I don't want to give away too much,
Yeah.
um, but it helps mature him to the point where he can make this decision for himself, even though he knows his mother will be very disappointed.
Interesting. Uh, in the story, what is your favorite part that you wrote that, just really stands out to you?
Yeah, I think there's a character who joins the team, a boy who joins the team late,
Mhm.
who is a foster child,
Mhm.
and the book actually takes place in my home, the borough that I grew up, the borough of New York City that I grew up in, Staten Island.
Mhm.
Staten Island, for those of your listeners who may not be familiar with New York, is sort of like the outermost borough of New York City. It was sort of its last frontier. It's kind of built up now, but there was always this sort of rural mentality. Staten Island had more space, more playing fields.
Yeah.
So the fact that I grew up there, but I grew up in an area that was pretty poor. I grew up in public housing,
Mhm.
and so I created a character in the book who comes from the same development public house projects, as we call them, that I came from. And he joins the team. And there's something about this kid as a foster child who connects with Z, who's going through um, his own family trauma because of his dad's accident. And the connection they make leads to a very tender moment where the boy who's the foster child winds up in a home that's not on Staten Island. And it breaks Z's heart that this kid is no longer not only
Mhm.
in the same school, but not on but also not on his team anymore. There is a point in the book where the boys become reunited. And the people who have asked to read the book, for things like,
Yeah.
author blurbs, and several have mentioned that they actually cried when these two kids get united because of the connection they've made as teammates, but also as friends from very different kinds of backgrounds as well.
Interesting. Um, Going back to kind of, I mean, this seems like it's a lot of a book of experiences and that you've experienced and you've seen other people. Have you seen a lot of resemblance in, all your 25 years of sports reporting, how it's just gone from, like you said, this joyful, fun thing for youth players to now, this competitive, everyone needs to make money, and especially in the sport of basketball that you've covered. I mean, AAU is a particular one that everyone tends to point out a lot is kids start to get specialized in that, and then there's all this money and this you got to win. Have you kind of noticed a lot of things throughout your in the sports career that have your sports journalism career that you really tied into the book?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think there's different uh, lines of discussion on it. I read an article recently on the athletic site where they quoted Jurgen Klopp of my former uh, beloved Liverpool
Yeah.
manager, saying uh, that the American soccer system has become too much pay to play,
Mhm.
and that although the USA Soccer has wanted to better model our system on the Euro system,
Mhm.
where kids are, specializing playing year round from a very young age and all that. Over there, you don't, you don't pay a small fortune
Mhm.
um, when you join a club. It's much less expensive. And so if you're going under that model, there has to be a affordability. Otherwise, you're eliminating tons of kids. Another interesting post I saw
Mhm.
the other day, reading on parent chat boards and stuff, was somebody saying, and I don't know where this was. It was a guy who grew up in Mexico, and his father was a professional player there. And he said, that obviously they immigrated to the U.S. And he was saying that his son is on some, club team, I think MLS Next or something.
Mhm.
Um, and but he kid needed some more foundational experience.
Mhm.
So he joined some La Liga Hispanic youth team,
Yeah.
and that the kids were playing. They weren't paying really any money to play, and that the skills was so much more developed
Mhm.
because they were just playing for the joy of it.
Yeah.
So I think I think there's that issue about you know the money that's being spent, but also there's um, I just feel like uh, in the way we're going about it, um, you know, again, not to beat a dead horse, but
Mhm.
we are putting other ideas in the heads of children at too young an age about why they're playing.
Mhm.
So, I did a story a bunch of years ago on two kids from my hometown who are at the elite, who are at the high school level, at the point where they were told that if you're playing by their club, if you're playing for your club, um, you can't play high school soccer.
Mhm.
And I watched these two kids through. I followed them through a fall season. The one kid who was playing, um, who stayed with the club team, was commuting an hour from like here down to Trenton, New Jersey for practices. I went to practice with him. He's doing his homework late at night in the back of the car, calling his mother and saying, I'm hungry, have something to eat when I get home. The other kid stayed on the high school team. I remember they played two games against the local private school
Mhm.
and lost them both, which was a huge upset. And they were excruciating, but the whole town came out,
Mhm.
and, there was these beautiful weekend afternoons, Saturday afternoons. And the kid who was on the high school team, literally crying after these games. And the high school team kind of floundered through the regular season, but then in the state tournament, caught fire and wound up winning a sectional title.
Mhm.
And the boy who had quit the team and joined the club team um, sat in the stands with all the other kids, all the other classmates, eating his heart out that he wasn't playing on the high school team.
Yep.
And that is a tough decision for a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old to make.
Yep.
Um, Wrote the story and promised the parents that I would pass no judgment
Mhm.
about the right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong.
Yep.
Um, but it creates a lot of questions that I think parents really need to have strong discussions with their children about. What do you want out of this? Do
Mhm.
you want to play high school soccer with the kids you grew up with? in front of the people, in your town who come out to support the team? Or do you want to play at an elite level where the quality, overall quality is better and there are more practices, less focus on games and more on practices, but you're going to be commuting great distances. And when we go to your games, only the parents are going to be there. And it's going to be against kids that you really don't know. You may develop a relationship with them or not, but it's going to be a very different experience. And so I think as I began to explore these issues in my columns at the Times, um, sometimes I, just raised questions and didn't come have strong conclusions,
Mhm.
because it is up to the individual family. I think my advice is just to pay close attention and not get swept along by people who may or may not. It's sort of like the American. Lately, I've been thinking kind of like the American healthcare system. Is our system set up for the benefit of of pure health to take care of people, or is it set up so that the insurance companies make a lot of money? Right. I would raise the same question about not just our youth soccer programs, but all sports. And I think that this book is really something that a kid playing any youth sport would appreciate reading, and that the parents would, um, be mindful of the message for them. Um, and that is the system that we've built in this country now that is only becoming more and more, about profit, set up for the benefit of children, or is it set up for big business to make a lot of money? Doesn't mean it can't be both in some cases. As I said, I've covered great athletes from Magic and Harry to Jordan to LeBron to Federer, Nadal, McEnroe. I've dealt with all the great athletes and all the prima donnas, and I loved many of them. And I enjoyed. I remember sitting at courtside in the old Boston Garden, watching the Celtics-Lakers rivalry of the '80s,
Mhm.
and turning to one of my colleagues and saying, right now there's really no place on earth I'd rather be than here. So I appreciate greatness, and I appreciate great young athletes. Can I tell you a quick story about something that personal that happened? In my first house in Montclair, New Jersey, which is, about 13, 14 miles from
Mhm.
in Tuttle, that takes you to New York City, to Manhattan. I used to walk my kids every day to the school around the corner. We have a magnet school system in town, which means you choose the school that you want to go to based on its focus.
Yeah.
And so you either walk to school or bus to school. There were two girls um, who lived around the corner from us, and every day we would walk our kids to school. They would be out there kicking a soccer ball, rain, snow, sleet, whatever. And so we used to get a kick out of them, right? And I knew the family a little bit. And then we moved to a different part of town.
Mhm.
The next time I saw this the older of the two daughters, was on television playing for an NCAA title at North Carolina,
Wow.
for Anson Dorrance's North Carolina
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Her name is Yael Averbush.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I was watching this, and I remember when, she didn't play on the high school team.
Yeah.
She didn't, she played on boys teams early on.
Yeah.
And there are two or three girls on Z's team as they go through
Mhm.
the young years.
Yeah.
Um, and there was always a little bit of a controversy in town about Yael. Was should she be playing on a girls' team? Should she be? And then when she got to high school, is she missing out too much of the high school experience because she's always traveling with the whatever age
Yeah.
appropriate national team? And it was talked about, quietly, not that openly, but having my kids been playing soccer in those years, I
Mhm.
was on the grapevine, right? So I called her mom and I met her for coffee in town.
Hmm.
And I said, I want to do a column on Yale.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Yale, spelled Yael,
Hmm.
right? Scored a goal. There's a great YouTube clip of Yael Averbuch scoring a goal on the opening kickoff of a game against, of all schools, Yale. So I remember the column, in the lead of the column, I wrote, I described this goal and I said, and after 3 seconds or 4 seconds, it was Yael. Right? Um, so I sat down with her mom and I said, um, how did you know? Did you ever? And she said, of course, my husband and I asked ourselves these questions.
Mhm.
And um, she said, and she raised a point that stayed in my head about if, we knew that people were talking behind our backs about, kind of life that Yale was living.
Yep.
And she was the one who said to me, but if she were a great artist or a great musician, they wouldn't say that. It's just about this prejudice against sports.
Mhm.
It's people are easy to say, oh, they helicopter parents, they're crazy, and they're pushing their kid and they're going to ruin them. Um, but I sling her ball and
Mhm.
her water bottle and saying, "Mom, I'm going to be late for practice." And every time we went on vacation, whether it was to upstate New York or Europe,
Mhm.
she insisted on packing the balls and finding a park to go have her kick around, right? She said, if your child is demonstrating that kind of love and passion, of course you're going to go for it. Of course you're going to support them.
Yes.
And that's what I mean about, the idea of parents living vicariously through their children and trying to create something that may or may not be there. She was telling me that, and when I interviewed Yael for it, she said, yes, I missed on a hell of a lot in high school. And I didn't have the friendship groups, I didn't have the closeness, but she
Mhm.
said, you know what? I'm experiencing, she was a sophomore when they won the NCAA title. I'm experiencing it now. Now, Yael, while she was in the national program, never played in the Olympics or in the World Cup. I
Mhm.
always thought, like, she's a big young girl, big
Yeah.
girl, young
Yeah.
woman. She might have lacked the foot speed for the midfield position,
Mhm.
um, but she did play professionally in Europe. She played in Sweden. I know she played in Sweden and a couple of other places. She did play in the NWSL. And now Yael Averbuch is the general manager of the Power, the team that plays here in Northern Jersey.
Mhm. Oh,
So she,
Gotham.
I'm not sorry, the Gotham, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and she's made a career of it, and she's widely respected. So there's one example of a unique elite player who I had sort of a personal interaction and experience with following her through the system. And so I use Yael sometimes as an example of a kid who, it was all worth it. And but her parents were extremely, um, I think, um, cognizant
Mhm.
of everything that was going on as she was experiencing it and as the family was experiencing it. Um, so yeah, that's, it was always gratifying to see, what became of her.
Harvey, we appreciate your time on We're Soccer. This is great. You mentioned in the beginning, just kind of talked about the book when it's released. And obviously, Amazon Prime, you can pre-order. Will be, ebook as well as hard copy. Can you let us know about that?
Yeah, so the book drops, as we say now in the modern era, December. Again, the name of the book is The Goal of the Game by me. I also have a website, harveyaraton.com, where I've been started to blog about the book and some of the issues that the book covers. Um, so it's available for pre-order now. Uh, like I said, it publishes December 16th, so it will be. I think it will ship on that date,
Mhm.
so it should arrive for the holidays as a gift.
Okay.
Um, I at this point in my career, I really only want to write any career track anymore. I really only want to write things that are meaningful to me,
Yeah.
and something that I think that can contribute to a discussion. And again, I want to reiterate the point that while the book focuses on a kid who drops out
Mhm.
of that high stakes youth sports experience, at least for the moment, we don't know, there could be a sequel,
Yeah.
but I do not want parents in particular to think that I am saying that the whole thing should be blown up,
Hmm.
and kids should just go back to the time when they played without parent supervision, things like that. Um, we live in a certain reality,
Yeah.
and sports is something to play in college, high school, college, beyond that potentially. Is it a wonderful, amazing life to be created? But I think that it's the system that we're now are in, specifically with big business getting involved, demands that parents really be aware of what's going on and what exactly they're paying for.
Mhm.
So that would be the message I would leave you with, and your readers with. I mean, your listeners with. Um, but I really want to thank you, Brooks, for giving me the opportunity. I've really enjoyed talking about the book and talking about the world of youth sports at large. It's been a lot of fun.
Perfect. Thank you, Harvey. I appreciate it. You have a good rest of your day, and we look forward to talking again if you write a sequel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you.